Greetings and welcome to STEM Inspired, where we utilize personal stories and experiences to interest the possibility of a STEM profession in adolescence. I'm your host, Jacob Zendejas. Today on the show we have a wildlife biologist. They played soccer and tennis, they love exploring nature, and they are part of restoring the beauty to the Channel Islands. Please give a warm welcome to Annie Little. Could you tell us your name and what you do for a living?
My name is Annie Little, and I'm a wildlife biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I work in Ventura, California. I'm stationed at Channel Islands National Park.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. And what's it like to go to work every day?
It's really great working out on the Channel Islands. I don't go out to the field every day. I'm mostly based in the office, but all of my projects are on the islands. I get to go out there and check on progress or help out with some of the activities. It's really rewarding being a part of efforts to conserve places like Channel Islands National Park and some of our wild spaces is really rewarding and inspirational work.
Definitely. And what is the best part about your profession?
Being a wildlife biologist is really special because you get to work, with wild creatures. And you also, in the field that I am particularly interested in, conservation biology, the conservation of our wild spaces and our natural areas. So it's really rewarding in that sense of, feeling like you're contributing to the long-term conservation of species and wild places. I would say definitely starting in high school that I started to really connect with sort of the world around me, the more natural world. I started playing sports, when I was younger. I kind of grew up in a suburban area outside of Los Angeles. I wasn't down in the river chasing fish or catching lizards as a child. That just wasn't, I was more like playing sports and playing soccer and tennis and stuff. So I didn't have kind of the traditional, where some wildlife biologists, they just were from very young age immersed in the natural world and learning about things. That really wasn't my start. It was more in high school where I started to do some outdoor activities like camping and backpacking that I really understood it's, I really loved being outdoors and seeing the wild places and seeing the wildlife. So it was really at that point that I started to connect to nature and sort of that really piqued my interest. So I would say, really in high school is when I started to really come to realize it really fascinates me. Biology is really an interesting topic. There's so much to learn about how our natural world works and how we interact with it. That was really the moment, sort of the pivotal times that helped shape where I wanted to go with my career and where I wanted to invest my time. I think one time in particular, I went to the Channel Islands when I was 10 years old, actually. So that was earlier. That was more in 5th grade, I think. So that was my first trip to the islands. And I remember just having this, feeling of, wow, this is just it's such an amazing place. And you have the seabirds flying around you, and it's just so different, right, than your little town and your world. And you're like, oh, it's just so wild and free, and just making that crossing from the mainland to the islands, that really had a big impact on me. Just seeing the dolphins and the marine life and just seeing there's just this whole other world out there. So that definitely was a moment that I remember growing up that had an influence on me. And I had another trip in high school where I went out on a whale watch cruise. And we saw migrating gray whales. And so that was another one of these, just moments in time where I was just in awe of these creatures, just seeing such a huge creature and learning about the unique biology of this species that travels basically all the way from the Bering Sea down into Mexico to give birth in the warmer waters of Mexico. And then they turn around and make the migration back. And and sort of since that moment and learning about gray whales and just migration in general, that was just such an interesting thing to me.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great accomplishment. How does the biology fit into what you do?
Yeah, so I'm mostly right now working on restoration. The Channel Islands have had a lot of different impacts over time, from invasive species, non-native species that were introduced to the islands that had a pretty significant impact on the native vegetation out there, and the wildlife community. Right now, my job has been to focus on trying to restore the habitat, in particular for seabirds.
You talked about, the importance to, tell the younger children, not only, to have a voice for the wildlife out there in the ocean, but
Mhm.
also, the importance of the science and how to understand that. What's something, you would want to tell those children that the importance of for learning science, biology, and understanding just the creatures in itself?
Biology is really it's so important to know if you want to understand the world around us and how even we work. And so I think getting students engaged in biology and science is really, it's so important because you understand, how do we interact with this environment. I think that's just really important for kids to understand, the basic building blocks of life, and why, how we've kind of come to be, and really what our how we fit into the bigger picture. And I think that's really important, just to think beyond just our species, and to understand how we fit into the larger global community, and individual species. Yeah, science is a fundamental building block to understanding the world around you. And I think it's really important for kids to understand that, and to connect, to go outside and connect. And
Yeah, definitely. And can you tell me about someone who has been the biggest influence in your life?
I was trying to think of that when you sent me the list. And um, I don't really have one person in particular that was the biggest influence in my life. There was just people along the way that influenced me, and that some of them I met and some of them I didn't meet. Like, for example, like my high school biology teacher, Mrs. Gruther, she was great. She made biology and science fun. So, that person helped spark my interest in biology, just at that level. And then when I was in college, and I was starting to take all these other science courses, and and in college is really where you get to choose, right? Where you want to go, and what really interests you. So I think professors in college too really helped solidify my interest. Rachel Carson, she actually used to work for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and she was one of, very well-known scientists, and she helped uncover some of the science behind the impacts of DDT, and her whole book, The Silent Spring. Just really inspirational folks that helped really drive home the importance of protecting your environment, and why it's important to have clean air and clean water, and to try and regulate pesticides, for example. Just many heroes along the way. So I think I would say not one person has influenced me just the most, but a series of individuals that I've kind of learned about or come across, in my career.
Yeah. Okay. So just a bunch of just different knowledge, just, being exposed to. What's some of the lessons that they've taught you?
Like Rachel Carson, for her, like, she had the importance of science, right? And understanding. For a while, there was all this impact in the environment from the pesticide DDT, but people weren't really understanding, well, why were birds not being able to reproduce? Well, we then understood it was because DDT was being used as a widespread pesticide, and it got in the food chain and ended up having impacts to birds. Birds would lay thin eggs and not be able to reproduce. And we saw that out here, in particular on the Channel Islands, because there was a large manufacturing plant of DDT called the Montrose facility, and it dumped all these DDT waste into the Southern California marine environment. And so now that we have the understanding that that was DDT, but that was all based on science and observation and data. And I think that's really important, to have good science to understand the world around you. And I think even, today in our climate of, global warming and climate change, there's a lot of science behind that. And it's important to believe in science and to pursue the truth. And I think that's just really important.
When you were younger, what did you imagine you would do for work?
When I was younger, I thought I'd be either a medical doctor or a veterinarian. So when I was probably in middle school, I really loved animals. So I'd say my love of animals started really young, but it wasn't necessarily wildlife. It was more like, I always had like 4 dogs at home, and I just loved animals. And I used to volunteer at the local humane society and just try and help the animals. And again, it was kind of one of those things, like a little bit early on, I felt like, these animals didn't really have a voice. And so we were trying to help give a voice to them and make things better. So I'd say sort of that theme has been, throughout my life. So I didn't necessarily imagine it when I was younger, but I think I had the foundation for wanting to help animals in some way. So that was sort of clear early on, and then it just evolved from there.
And what advice or information would you give yourself when you were younger?
I think I would just say you follow your passion. And that kind of sounds cliche, but I truly do think that you will have the most impact when you are doing something that means something to you. And if you're passionate about something and it is, a driving force for you, then you should pursue it. And I took a little bit of time to, figure out what I wanted to do. And I didn't really figure it out till college. And some people know a lot earlier. Like some people want to become a wildlife biologist when they're, 5 years old. But for me, it took a little bit of time to get there. And I think it was just, I would say for folks that are interested in the sciences, just to go out and explore and see what's out there, and take internships and take volunteer opportunities. See what it's all about.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed our program. STEM Inspired is a project of BC STEM Ventura County's cross-sector network to improve educational outcomes in the STEM fields from early learning to career. STEM Inspired is generously funded by Arconic. Innovation engineered. Please join us next time as we continue to dive into the lives and experiences of STEM professionals. As always, I'm Jacob Zindejas. Discover new things. You never know when an interest can become a passion that can change the world. This has been STEM Inspired.